Welcome to Rebooted the Podcast. I'm your host, Alita Hernandez. Come join me weekly to hear about my journey from recovery to healing after having a stroke and other life challenges. So let's get talking. Hi, everybody. It's Alita Hernandez, Rebooted the Podcast, and simultaneously be on Western Magazine as well. And I'm honored here today to be with Congressman Adam Smith. Good morning, Congressman. How are you today? Can you hear me well?
I am great. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. So I saw that you come out with a memoir, Lost and Broken, and it just caught my attention, I guess, by the title, and especially because we're going through so much since 2020 with mental issues. And that's one thing that I feel that we don't talk enough about. There's a lot of other things they talk about on the news, but not about mental health and the struggles that we go through. So let's talk about you. How did you, start this journey, and what was the trigger that happened?
Well, I went through, well, it started in 2013 with a bout of uncontrollable anxiety. I mean, I'd always been a high stress person, and I had a bout of depression when I was in my 20s, just briefly 4 or 5 months, and then an attack of anxiety back in 2005, all of which I got through without really thinking about much. But in 2013, just an uncontrollable amount of anxiety came over me that was different. Well, it was the same as it was in 2005, but it was different than normal. So I didn't know what to do about it. So I went through a series of psychiatrists, psychologists, trying to figure out what was going on, medications, all of that. And then about a year after that, I developed chronic pain in my hips and back, which, I wound up doing 3 hip surgeries, 2 total replacements. And even after those surgeries, I was just in worsening shape to the point where I was in pretty much constant pain and, unable to sit, stand, and again, battled through a whole bunch of different medications. So basically, over the course of 6 years, I tried to figure that out. Going back, into my history, I had knee surgery when I was a kid, and then mentally I was adopted. I had some family issues, and trying to figure out how do I sort all of that out to heal my body and mind? And during the course of that, as I document in the book, I went to over 100 different healthcare providers of one kind or another, trying to figure this out. So the memoir sort of explains that journey. And ultimately, I got to a good place. I found a psychologist who did help me. I found a muscle activation therapist who taught me how my body works. So I wrote the memoir, well, at first, just to sort of get it fresh in my mind. What happened? In the military, they refer to it as an after-action report, if you will, to help you understand it. But then, as I was telling the story, as you alluded to, this is something that millions of people in this country go through in some combination. So I felt writing the book, given my position as a member of Congress, would help start that conversation, or not start it, help that conversation overall, to hopefully, help people in this country and our healthcare system overall figure out better how to help people facing, chronic pain or a mental illness.
Yeah, I see it's a big issue. I see people in the street, and since I'm in Florida, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, so the homeless issue is not aggressive like in other states, but you do see some people in the street, and most of them that I see have some form of mental issue or some form of depression. I mean, it's some form of depression because they're either using a substance or they're just, they're in the street. Right. They don't know what to do. And I was looking up statistics. So they say that our depression levels since 2020 have increased about 25% in the United States. And we have the United States has like the highest level of mental health issues. And looking at like 15 million Americans suffering with depression, our suicide rate has gone up, drug overdoses, So, and what you're talking about, just briefly, that you talked about, a lot of people have gone through similar things, family issues, abandonment issues, that things that trigger us from our child that we don't even realize that affect us as an adult.
Well, speaking from a public policy standpoint, I honestly feel, there's a ton of challenges out there that we're facing. I think the core of, 90% of all of them does come back down to mental health. You mentioned homelessness and well, substance abuse has become a huge problem. You simply can't function as well as a human being when you're experiencing these things. And if we could treat the underlying mental health issues, the depression, the anxiety up front, that would help with all of these other issues. And we're a little bit lost in this country in terms of figuring out how to deal with it.
Yeah, it's really sad because I remember as a kid we used to have they used to be state hospitals for mental health, and then I'm not sure the history of it. You would know more maybe than me.
Yeah.
That when the state hospitals closed due to I think there was abuse and some other conditions. I don't know what it was.
Well, the history of it is this. The history is that, for years, institutions were what we did. And a lot of times institutions were, okay, we don't know how to deal with this person. We're going to institutionalize them. Okay. And without question in the 60s and 70s, and frankly, it's the same with our criminal justice system, we became over-reliant on locking people up, whether it was for mental health conditions or through our criminal justice system. And that basically took a lot of lives and ruined them. And a lot of people noticed this and wanted better in a different system. So that, I think, was perfectly logical. And the idea was, well, we should do more community-based care. We should do more rehabilitation. But there were two sort of flaws with that as the policy was implemented. First of all, that we never built the community-based care. We don't have the systems of, smaller community-based treatment facilities. There just isn't the volume. And the second problem with that is some people do need to be institutionalized. And by the way, that is a very controversial sentence for me to utter. There's a lot of people who totally disagree with that. I just think they're wrong. I think there are some problems that are so severe that it requires that institutionalization. And then the second big piece of the controversy here is who makes the decision? Because what we've shifted towards is the idea that the individual in crisis should have greater control over those decisions. And to some degree, in certain instances, that can make sense. But if you have someone who is suffering from severe mental illness, severe abuse of drugs, they might not be in a position to make that decision. So, but we've become very reluctant to have the state or government make that decision. And as a consequence, it's very hard to involuntarily commit people to get the mental health treatment or drug treatment. And we've seen that problem explode across the country when combined with the fact that, like I said, we have insufficient treatment facilities in your average community. Seattle, I represent part of Seattle. I live in a suburb just outside of there. They have a major problem with this. And it's so expensive in the Seattle area that a lot of your traditional, residential treatment facilities, which would be, your 10, 15 beds in a group home kind of setting, they can't afford to make that work. They can't afford the property in order to set it up, given the cost of real estate versus, what they would have to spend to provide adequate care for people. So we don't have the institutions, we don't have the community-based care, and we've got people, out there with desperate problems not getting any help.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. I don't know where it's going to go or how we're going to help people because some people end up in the prison system, in jail due to mental health because they're irate in the street and the cops can't go do a psychological assessment in the middle of the street, right? So a lot of the people end up there too. So it's a really sad thing. But so going back to you, how when before did you start doing the memoir in the process of your journey or when you got the epiphany, like aha moment?
No, I mean, essentially the timeline was March of 2013, the anxiety hits me. I found a psychologist, didn't work out, found a whole bunch of the whole thing. And finally, I found a psychologist who did in fact help me. I found him in late 2015. It took about 3 years. He told me right up front what the problem was, but I didn't know exactly what he was talking about. And I was stubbornly resistant to following the solution. And then I found a muscle activation therapist in April of 2018 who really finally explained to me how my body worked and why my problem wasn't so much a hip problem as it was that my muscles weren't working the way they were supposed to because, well, in 1982, I had knee surgery. I had a knee problem when I was a kid playing sports, and I never rehabbed it. So my right leg got significantly weaker than my left, and my whole body, just started slowly. Well, it took about 30 years, twisted out of shape. So he got my muscles going again. And so by I don't know, early mid 2019, I was coming out of it. April 2019, I finally got off the last of the 5 or 6 different drugs that I'd been taking for a while. And so by the end of 2019, I was feeling human again, if you will.
Right.
And I thought, okay, just what happened here? It was pretty fresh in my mind. Well, I'm an excessively logical person. So throughout that entire process, I had been writing and writing and writing. Okay, what's going on? Okay, I saw this person. They said that. It did that, this huge, array of information. I was like, well, let's try to make sense of it. At that point. So I didn't start writing the book until after I felt better. Then, of course, the pandemic hit. So I had a little bit more time on my hands. So I actually wrote it in 2020. But the other piece of this that's important, we talked earlier about severe mental illness. The larger problem is with just people struggling. They can function. They're not, wandering around on the streets. They don't necessarily give in to severe drug abuse, but they still have anxiety and depression that is causing them pain on a day in and day out basis. And what are the basics of mental health that we should all pay attention to? That's sort of what I learned through the psychotherapy that I went through and the examination of the issues involved. And I think the other piece of this is to give us a baseline of mental health that applies to all of us, to think about how does your mind work? What should you be thinking about in order to put yourself in a more peaceful place? And that's sort of what psychotherapy did for me. Over the course of, like I said, about 3.5 years.
Correct. Yeah, well, the psychotherapy, I know there are different forms of it. I just interviewed this woman who does functional psychotherapy, which I thought was very good because it's combining that holistic side, which I love, more natural form, and looking at a person as an individual, because everybody is different. Everybody's circumstances are different. So we can't categorize, sometimes we're categorized, okay, mental health is one straight line, but it's not, because what I went through and what you went through are different. And also, I want to talk about as a man, because people don't, this is another thing that I find that is not discussed. Most women were very vocal and will talk about it, but men usually do not. And there's a stigma, I think, in society anyway, just to go get help, therapy. So what do you say to those men out there, to help them, in that situation?
Yeah, well, there's 2 big aspects of that. First of all, and yes, I think it is a bigger problem for men, but it's a problem for women as well. In society in general, you don't want to be perceived as being weak. Is the biggest thing. If you have a problem, you should be able to get through it. And I think this applies to men and women equally. Now, on the physical side, there is a little bit of a stigma there too. If you're unable to, physically do what you need to do, there could be a bit of an issue. But people understand that better. If you break your leg skiing, well, okay, you had a skiing accident. You're going to be in a cast, or you're going to be walking on crutches for a while. You're not going to be as active. A lot of people, don't want to be in that position, but it's better understood as a society. As a society, we tend to think on the mental health side, there's this is the way I thought about it. There's this line. either you're normal or you're crazy. Okay. And you definitely want to stay on the normal side of that line. All right. And so the second it's like, oh my, you don't want to believe it. You don't want to say, because gosh, if I go over here, then I don't know who I am or how to get treatment. And society will view me differently because of it. And so I think men to some extent do have a problem with that because mentally they're supposed to be strong, and that's the perception. I think this definitely crosses gender lines, but yes, when I first developed this, when the anxiety hit me, and is different than just normal stress. Anxiety is an uncontrollable 24/7 feeling of existential fear that doesn't really link to anything specifically. Okay. It's just there. All right. I didn't want people to know. Absolutely the case. Because I felt if they knew, they would think that I was unpredictable, undependable. And in my job as a member of Congress, I might well lose that job. But the second big piece of it that I think is a little bit more gender specific is what you alluded to. One of the 3 or 4 key things to having solid mental health is to be honest with yourself about what you're anxious about, what you like, what you don't like, what's going well in your life. I mean, I think and what's not going well in your life, I think we frequently try to cover that up. Maybe you're in a relationship that you can't get out of, so you kid yourself that you're happy about it when you're really not, or something that happened to you years ago that you either on the one hand you feel like you were unfairly treated and never got any justice for it, and you've sort of buried it, but it's always made you angry on a sub level. Or on the other hand, maybe you've done something that you're not proud of when you were younger, and you never adequately atoned for it internally or whatever. You have to be honest about that. And I do think there's a culture, women more often than men tend to talk to each other about this. If you just keep that bottled up inside, now maybe you can talk to yourself and you can be honest with yourself, but it's a heck of a lot easier if you've got people who you can openly talk to about it. Because if you keep it buried and you don't honestly address it, that is one of the big things that is going to make you more anxious or more depressed than you otherwise would be, is suppressing issues that truly do matter to you, acting like, oh, I don't care, it's all fine, when it's really not. All right. Now, you have to work towards, resilience in this. And I think part of the problem that we have with honestly addressing those issues is there are a lot of people that are very skeptical of this type of, psychotherapy and discussion, that it becomes an all-purpose excuse for everything that you don't want to do in the world. And that's not the case. You need to talk about these things so that you can become more resilient and actually be more productive in life, so that these things aren't dragging you down. So yes, you have to be honest and open about what you're facing. That's one of, like I said, the 3 or 4 big things that I figured out about, how you deal with mental health. I mean, in my case, it was my adoption, my upbringing, how the family I grew up with didn't really work out well, and my very complicated feelings about that I had never really dealt with. But we all have different issues. You just have to make sure that you're honest about them.
Yeah. And not let it go to the point of when it gets to substance abuse, because a lot of times then they start going to get depression pills, and then those pills don't work, then you get something else. I mean, I've had anxiety too. I used to have panic attacks, and
Yeah.
I thought I was having a heart attack. The first time I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I couldn't breathe. I was like, I didn't know what to do. And I started drinking. I started doing, oh, I'll have a little screwdriver. And then it happened, one wasn't enough. So then I realized, hold on a second, what's going on? Something's not right. Why do I need to keep drinking to get rid of this feeling? No, I'm masking something else.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's, you basically try to drug it into submission.
exactly.
You try to drug it so that you don't think about it, which misses the point. It's the fact that you're not thinking about it that's causing the problem in the first place. You have to be open and honest about it, and address whatever it is you're feeling.
Yeah. It's taken me a long time,
Yeah.
years, and learning every day. I still learn now. So every day learning more stuff from
Yeah.
different people, just
Me
from like
too.
your experience, right? My experience, other people's experiences. And that's why I love doing this show. to get that message out there and to help other people, because I know a lot of people are struggling out there. And I've said it before, please reach out to, get the book, read other people's experiences, and also reach out and get help. There's a lot of help out there in every city. There's
Yeah.
different, therapy centers, psychologists,
And that's
somebody out
another
there.
key. That's sorry to interrupt. That's another key part of the message. And ultimately, if I could only get one message out there around this whole issue, it's what you just said. Help exists. You can get better. And I think there's a lot of people who don't really quite believe that. And there's sort of two reasons. One was sort of where I was coming from. Certainly, I was born in the mid 60s, so 60s, 70s, and 80s. There was sort of this general feeling that, therapy never really solved anything. All right. This notion. And that was my thought. It's like, since when has a psychiatrist ever made anyone better? It seems to me, in everything I've seen, that basically all you do is you go see them for the rest of your life and nothing really ever changes. That was my perception. In fact, I use this joke in the book that the satirical magazine, The Onion, if anyone's ever heard of that, had a headline that said, "Psychiatrist actually cures somebody." All right. And that was, and that's what I thought about it. But then so that's sort of modern, sort of the popular idea is, what are they going to do? How are they ever going to solve anything? And then I think the second thing is the belief that if you admit to a mental health problem and you seek treatment, you're just sort of never going to come out of it. That it's just, and that's simply not true. There are ways. There are treatments that are available that will make you better. You can figure out how your mind works so that you can deal with the stresses of life better than you do. There are techniques and therapies and help out there that's going to happen. It's not just a place where you go to talk about your problems to no particular end. There actually are therapies and treatments that can help you better deal with the stress in your life.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we want to give out, that message to everybody out there. Don't stay alone in this. Depression is real. Anxiety is real. The pandemic brought in a whole bunch of other problems with people that were already facing all these issues. And I still see it now. I see it in my friends. Some people are still afraid to go out. Some people are still wearing masks. It's 3 years. Like, you're harming yourself at this point now. You have to, I worry about those people, because you can see them now that they're just afraid to go out or be around people. I mean, and other people are fine. I do a lot of events, so there's a lot of parties going on. So I'm happy there are the other side, that a lot of people started to go out, enjoy life, having birthdays, having weddings.
And the important part about this is something that someone said to me way back in 2013 when I was first dealing with my anxiety. A psychologist that I knew said that it's not the amount of stress in your life, it's how you process it. And at the time she said that to me, I didn't believe it. Okay. Because my entire approach when this stuff would hit me was to think that, okay, obviously I've taken on too much. That's the problem. Okay, it's true. I can't handle this. I'm stressed about my kids. I'm stressed about my job. How do I take things out of my life? Okay. But that is an issue. You will certainly, the more stress you have in life, the more difficult it is. But the real issue is, how do you deal with stressful events? And when you mentioned the pandemic and how different people have dealt with it, if you have mental insecurities that you haven't dealt with, you're not going to be able to do it. Years after the pandemic is over, you're still going to be afraid of going out because you're not processing it in a logical way, because there are issues that you have not properly dealt with in how you view stress. So you can build your capacity to handle stress. And that's sort of one of the second big lessons. I've had a lot of people, my son can be a relatively high stress person as well. And we've had this conversation, and when he's upset about something and I'm walking him through it, and he'll say to me frequently, "I can't change the way I feel." All right. Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay. And that would be the second big lesson. because I think there's that feeling, an emotion hits me. Okay. I'm getting ready to go outside, but oh my gosh, the pandemic's out there. And it snowballs into this feeling that is so incredibly real, all right, that you think there's nothing I can do about it. But there is. And this is where cognitive behavioral therapy can come in, is to teach you you have to walk through, okay, why are you feeling that way? What's going on? How are you thinking about it? I have this story I like to tell. Takes a little while, but when I was first running for Congress in 1996, highly competitive race. I was running against a Republican incumbent. He spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of money, fur flying all over the place. The weekend before the election, I went out doorbelling in one of the neighborhoods, and somebody from my opponent had come through right before me and put a leaflet on the door. So every door I walked up to, there was this leaflet basically saying what a terrible, awful, horrible person Adam Smith was. Okay. And as I'm walking, literally, I felt like, A, everybody is reading this. B, everybody is believing it. And C, I'm going to lose the election because of it. And that feeling was unbelievably real. Okay. 100% real. And I knew on some level that it was complete nonsense. All right. It's one brochure on 150 doorsteps. We've spent millions of dollars at this point. The idea that one brochure on 150 doorsteps was going to decide my election was completely wrong, but I felt it and I believed it. And it really took a lot of effort back then to sort of think through it logically. But you can do that. You can change how you perceive events. Now it takes therapy, it takes understanding, but that is another big way that you can help process stress, is to figure out how your mind is taking you down a road that is not accurate and it is generating more fear than it should.
Yeah, and that's that movie reel that you make in your brain. And my husband says it the other day. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't stop the movie in my brain." Like he was worried about something, and then he started. It just snowballed, and he just made a sequel. You know what I mean? Like it just
Yeah,
continued.
absolutely. Well, the other
Yeah.
thing, and this is where meditation actually helped me. And
Yeah.
there's layers and layers and layers of meditation. And I went round and round on meditation. Always found it very frustrating. I used to joke that I'm stressed out because I can't find time to meditate. You know, and look, there's a layer of meditation where if you can practice and practice and practice for years and years and years, people can get to the point where, yes, you really can, you know, not quite become a Buddhist monk, but basically, and I was like, I don't have years to do this. I got kids, I got a job, I got a wife, I got things I got to do. You're telling me it's going to take me like 20 years of, 2 hours a day? You don't need to do that. What meditation ultimately wound up helping me, and there were a couple of different, meditation sites that delivered this message, is you can meditate at any point during the day. And basically what it means, I do it sometimes in the shower, brushing my teeth while I'm on a walk. Just go a couple of minutes without chasing any of the thoughts that come into your head. The language that is used is just notice it. Okay. So for 2 or 3 minutes, things are going to occur to you. You're not going to shut off all of your thinking. You're not going to shut off all of your senses, the sounds and the smells and everything and the thoughts that are going to come into you, but don't follow any of them. Just notice it and move on. Okay. And it's really important practice, because that's what can help you with that movie that your husband was deciding. You don't have to watch the whole thing. Okay. You can see it and go, okay, I noticed that. I'm not going to try to explain it. It's going to hit me and I'm going to move on. And that really helps you to process all the stuff that's coming at you if you do that practice. And you don't, like I said, you don't have to do, 20 minutes twice a day, or
right.
just let your brain occasionally go, I'm not shutting it off. I'm just not going to go chasing everything. And that can really help you relax.
Well, I'm happy you mentioned meditation, because that's exactly what he's doing now.
Good.
We're going on through this journey now, and we both do meditation, and he has learned on his own. He's taking it. In the beginning, he was very resistant, to understanding what meditation was and what do I need it. And now when he starts getting that movie starts going in his brain, he takes even 10 minutes. He just goes alone. He'll put the headset on There's a lot of stuff on YouTube for meditation. You can put
Yeah.
sounds. There's a lot of different things out there. Puts that on and he just goes to another zone. Just, download the movie, erase it, let's move on, So he's
Yeah.
learned to hit that to stop the trigger. And the whole thing is about mind. It's your mind, your thinking. I never understood it. I mean, we all have a brain, we have a mind, but we don't understand really the capacity that we have as a human being. We have so much capacity to heal. Your body will heal, but stress is such a dynamic word because it's a killer. Home stress, work stress, being a perfectionist, whatever you're doing, things, everything, your whole life, driving traffic, right? You tense up your body. You talked about how your body was, that you had your knee, you didn't have therapy for your knee. And then with all the anxiety too, that affects your body. It affects you physically. At least I found I did. I had a stroke 6 years ago. And that was my breaking point of, wow, I'm not doing things right. Something is not right here. And I had to change my mind, the way I think. And that's when I learned how much the mind controls the body, because I had semi paralysis. And thank God I am healed and I'm good again. But I did acupuncture, Chinese herbs,
Okay.
meditation, all these, new things to get back to get to a state that I'm happy with myself now.
Yeah, no, and I think you said an incredibly important thing that you said there is the capacity of the mind and the body to heal. Because that's sort of the second problem with, as I see it, sort of the modern take on mental health. It's sort of searching for the trauma in your life, which is good. That's part of how you have to sort of get to a mental place. But then you have to understand that you can heal, you can get better. Too much of what I've seen of modern discussions of mental health is, let me figure out why I'm dysfunctional. Okay. And that's important, certainly. All right. But it has this very fine line between then using that as an excuse, basically, to be dysfunctional. All right. As opposed to, I figure out the why so that I can fix it and get better. All right. And you really are incredibly resilient. What you said about the ability of the mind and the body to heal, because that, I start my book off, in 2016 after my third hip surgery, like 2 months afterwards, and I wasn't getting better. All right. I'm taking benzodiazepines, I'm taking oxycodone, 2 or 3 other drugs. My body isn't getting better. The anxiety is as high as it's ever been. And I thought, what was I at that point? I'm 50 years old. Okay. I'm 50 years old. My body is officially broken down. My mind, there's no coming back from this. I mean, that was honestly my thought, when I'm 25, 26, my knee hurts, whatever, I'll exercise. But now I'm almost 50, going on 51. There's no coming back from this. That was honestly my thought. But I did. Even at that age, the ability of the mind and the body to heal should not be underestimated. You can get better. The purpose of therapy is not just to figure out why you're screwed up. It's to figure out how you get better. And let me just emphasize here, I don't mean you're going to be perfect. And also, people are different. Okay. Some problems are more severe than others. Some you can adhere. I'm not saying you can get perfect. I am saying that no matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances are, you can get better. How much better is going to depend on a variety of different factors, but you have to believe that there's a path to get better, because it's absolutely true. The mind and the body have an unbelievable capacity to heal. We just need to sort of tune into that better.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the whole body. It's learning that it's the body, mind, soul, and spirit. So it's 4 parts. You have to address everything, and that
Yes.
was the biggest thing. Once you get and it was great what you said, because it's not finding out your diagnosis. I people are too stuck on that. And somebody I know said they went to the doctor and they got a diagnosis, and they're very upset about it because they didn't like the verbiage, like a label. I have this, And the person's like, what am I supposed to do now? I was like, no, don't label yourself. I never say, I have this, I have that disease, I have this disease. No, I'm healed. In my mind, I'm healing from whatever it is. I don't have it. So, it's like, it's about that thinking, right? So if they find out you have an imbalance, physical balance or whatever, you can address it. But a lot of the stuff that we go through is so subconscious stuff from, like you said, from childhood, things that we don't even remember, things we don't even realize that are triggering us. It could be 30 years down the line, oh, something triggers you. And you're like, why? Why is that triggering me? And it's learning about the subconscious and holding yourself. At least I find myself, um, you can't hold other people responsible for your condition.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and actually, this is something long before I went into therapy, and had the uncontrollable anxiety. I had a lot of frustration growing up. Now, in retrospect, I didn't know I was adopted. My parents never told me. I had problems in my family, all kinds of different issues going on. But I had this just incredible internal frustration. I was not happy, growing up. And I started drinking when I was 15. Just it was something to do and something to sort of take my mind off where I was at in the world. And I remember in my teenage years, I spent a lot of time feeling persecuted, okay, by one thing or another. And finally, when I was 19 years old and a freshman in college, in the midst of one of those feelings, I said, you know what? I do not want to figure out an excuse for why I'm not happy. I want to be happy. Okay. I want to get to the life that I want. So I'm going to stop all of this. It's unfair that this happened to me. It's unfair that that happened to me. I can't believe that, and I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out what I want to do and how to get there. And I think that's a great sort of template for an approach to mental and physical health. You don't go to get a diagnosis so that you can feel comfortable in your misery. Okay. You go to get a diagnosis so you can figure out how to get better. And that's hard because sometimes, you really do kind of there's a part of you that just wants a solid excuse. Okay. A solid excuse to give up, because it's so hard. I mean, if you're thinking, oh, there's something I could do and I'm just not figuring it out, is not a terribly comfortable feeling. But it can be a motivating feeling to get you down the path to figure out how you're going to get better. And that's ultimately what sort of saved me, if you will, was as bad as I felt and all of that. I just never lost that baseline determination. I'm going to figure this out, and I think we need to have that motivation. And again, tied back to the idea that you can get better. There are options out there if you can figure out what they are and generate the capacity to address them.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it's fear. A lot of us we're fearful of what we know and sometimes what we don't know. And we don't want to find out. Like you repress memories, bad things that happen to you in life, and it's taken me my whole life, to understand that too. Things that you've gone through that affects the way you act, the way you think, the way you do things. But yes, there's help out there. Our message is, please get help out there. Reach out to somebody, a therapist. There's a lot of therapy out there. Now we have the ability. Thank goodness when we were young, when I was young growing up, I was born in the 60s too. We didn't have these cell phones and we didn't have technology. So nowadays I get a little frustrated with people because I'm like, you have everything in your fingertips. Your phone is a computer. When I first started, if you remember, I worked on the first IBM PC, okay, in 1982. That the hard drive was as big as our screen that we're on, okay, and it was like this little, like it stored like 10 documents, and we were whole happy. So now you have this ability to look on this phone. There's so many apps out there for mental health. There's apps for sobriety with support groups. There's so much out here now. So people need to just you know, get on there, be determined. You can heal physically, mentally, and have a better life. So just reach out to somebody out there and get Congressman Adam Smith's book on Lost and Broken, which is on Amazon. And I'll have all the links on here once I publish the podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the chance to discuss this. And I think that's, as you can tell just from having that conversation. And one of the things that's been remarkable in this process is so many people that I've known in one capacity or another, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, sometimes 40 years, as this comes out, as I write this book, they're like, yeah, I've had terrible anxiety in my life. And I've known these people, I never knew it. So it helps start the dialogue, and then we can learn from each other on how to get better. So it's been remarkable to have the opportunity to hear all those stories.
That's awesome. And then you had your support of your family, your wife, your children, and they saw you go through this process. So yeah, it must be interesting to have people that you work with and people that your friends that didn't know that you went through all this, and now they're like, Adam, what happened? Why come you say anything? What do you mean you went through all this stuff? Oh my gosh, right? Everybody's like,
yeah. I have had many people reach out to me with pretty much exactly that sentiment. So yes.
But yeah, see, and that's the thing. So many of us we're suffering in silence. Yeah. We suffer in silence to our friends and our family. We put the face, it's like the commercials. You put the face on, you're smiling, everything's good. Yeah. But when the door closes, you're not.
Well, and I think that's also, you mentioned modern technology, and that's one of the downsides to modern technology, though, is you can create a picture. And this is sort of the fear of missing out thing that you talk about, that people talk about, psychology and FOMO. It makes you feel in some way, you see all these pictures and all these images of other people, and they look like they've got this great life. They're so happy. Everything's going well. What's wrong with me? That's just a picture. Okay. That's just an image. That's not really what's going on. All right. And I think that's part of it. I remember I made this observation when I was raising, my children. You see all the family pictures and everybody. Nobody ever takes a picture when your kid's throwing up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you haven't slept in 2 days, and you and your spouse are screaming at each other about who's not doing enough to help the baby.
It's true.
Okay. So you also have to recognize that life is not as perfect as it is presented to you in the media world. And I guess, so that helps you realize that you are real. There's nothing weird about you. A lot of people who are putting up these very, very positive pictures, they're dealing with some of the same stuff you're dealing with. It's perfectly normal and perfectly fixable.
Exactly. So that's why I'm always transparent. I talk about, who I am, what I go through and the struggles. And I interview people like you to talk about these natural things that we all go through and that we all share similarity. It doesn't matter where you live, where you come from, your background, your ethnicity. We all go through very similar things in life. And there's there's tons of books out there, but when I first had my kids, I said, we need a manual, but I mean a real manual. You know what I mean? Like I remember back when I had the kids in the 90s, I was like, when I got home with the baby, and I'm like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Because you're young, you have a child, right? You're born to, like, you're raised to, okay, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you marry, and so on. You do the family, right? So it was hard. I got home with a newborn baby. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. It was real, right? You at the baby and you're like, oh my goodness. So it's almost the same thing. You look at your fears, your anxiety, and it's like you're looking at that child. Like, now I have a responsibility. So now what do I do?
Well, and that's where you need to see support. It's like, there are a lot of books out there now.
Yeah.
What to expect. But the one thing that I said that I learned about being a parent is you can do all that, but there's no preparing for it past a certain point. Yeah. Okay. and I'm thinking of the Mike Tyson line that's gotten a lot of play here recently about everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's like, you can have this great plan, but then all of a sudden there's the baby and you don't know what's wrong and trying to figure out. And that's why, having support, and you got to learn as you go. You have to be adaptable, I guess, is the best that I would say. It's good to study. It's good to have a plan, but also understand that it is the nature of life that it will surprise you and you will have to adjust.
Yeah, that's to talk about surprise. That's true.
Yeah.
Just makes us stronger, right?
It does. It does. If you think about it the right way, if you think about it as a learning experience and not some sort of failure on your part, it can absolutely make you stronger.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I've hit rock bottom and come back. And I look at my life now and say, I'm just grateful. One thing that I do, I wake up every day grateful. I'm grateful to be alive, grateful for my family. I still have my mother with me at 85 years old. And so I'm very grateful for my life and able to, speak to you and speak to other people out there. And hopefully we impact somebody with this message. So that's all we want to do is help another person out there.
That is my hope, without question.
So I appreciate you and your time and the wonderful conversation. And I have a copy of your book. I'm gonna go through it. I have the digital copy. I can look through it and share it to other people out there so they can get it also on Amazon.
Thank you very much. Well, it's very nice meeting you, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So bye, everybody. Alida Hernandez, Rebooted the Podcast. Let me stop the recording. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Rebooted the Podcast to learn about each episode's guests and topics. This is your host, Alida Hernandez. See you next Tuesday.